Silent Hill. Next to Resident Evil, this is probably the most famous survival horror series out there. It is my personal favorite video game franchise next to Thief. Do not talk to me about Thief 2014. Silent Hill generally follows regular people haunted by otherworldly events in the titular American town, with a heavy emphasis on psychological horror brought on by an otherworld. Due to this framework, the series often tackles very dark subject matter involving its main characters. The series was heavily inspired by the works of Stephen King and David Lynch, not to mention the visuals calling to mind Jacob's Ladder, creating a really unique blend of styles that allows for pretty much anything surreal you could ask for. Silent Hill 1 was the start of the development team known as Team Silent, which had variable members who helped work on the first 4 games. There's an exhaustive amount of people to list, some of whom's artistic input often go under-discussed, with many artists fulfilling multiple roles due to the team structure calling more to mind 2D development rather than 3D. For instance, Takayoshi Sato was not just the character designer, but also was the person behind all of the game's FMVs. It's worth diving into each individual creator's resume in your own time to see how this project helped branch into various other experiences. For now, let's go ahead and start with the basics of Silent Hill 1 before getting into its deeper intricacies. Silent Hill 1 is about Harry Mason and his daughter Cheryl, who are initially driving to the resort town of Silent Hill for a vacation. After a car crash, however, Harry is separated from Cheryl and has to go on a journey to find her, with the town manifesting strange hallucinations and monsters which he needs to survive. Along the way, he meets with various other people in the town, some of whom live there, but others are outsiders like himself in the case of Sybil.
You from around here? Why don't you tell me what happened?
Wait a second, I'm just a tourist. I came here for a vacation. I just got here. I don't know what happened. I'd like to find out myself. Have you seen a little girl? Just turned 7 last month, short, black hair. My daughter.
Sorry. The only person I've seen in this town is you.
Where is everybody?
I'd tell you if I knew, believe me. But from what I can tell, something bizarre's going on. That's all I know. What's your name?
Harry. Harry Mason.
Sybil Bennett.
In direct comparison to Resident Evil 2, released the year prior in 1998, environments are presented in-engine rather than being pre-rendered backgrounds. This allows for gameplay that is a bit more fluid thanks to a more controllable camera, while still at its core being rooted in tank controls. The game will still sometimes use a fixed camera angle in order to highlight something important or make a room entrance spookier, but will mostly leave it up to you. Having things be done in-engine has some large ramifications on the game's aesthetic choices and direction. It allows for much more open environments, very noticeable when wandering the town, along with more dynamic cutscene direction, at the cost of overall detail being a bit lower due to hardware limitations. Comparing Harry's model with Leon's, for instance, Leon has about 120 more tries due to the fact that his game doesn't need to use many polygons at all for the background. Perhaps most noticeably, the famous Silent Hill fog was necessary in order to hide loading seams in the environment as individual chunks of a level are loaded into memory. This is of course contextualized in the story with the town of Silent Hill being set in the New England region of North America, which is known in real life for being quite foggy thanks to being next to a coastline, but it also contributes greatly to the atmosphere and mood, and if you were to remove it entirely, the game and by extension series' feel would radically change. Wandering around the town with the stellar sound design helps make things feel tense and hostile without a literal threat needing to be present. In general, progression is very straightforward and the difficulty is fairly low. There's no real inventory or resource management to speak of unless you play on hard, and you're guided fairly well with the use of the game's map for directions. Honestly, the hardest part of the game for me is the puzzles, since I'm terrible at them. And I think for that reason, it's why Silent Hill 2 introduced a separate puzzle difficulty for folks who want to still have the same base mechanical interaction without needing to put too much work in. The game being overall easy isn't a criticism, mind you. I actually think maintaining an illusion of tension is much more important for your first playthrough of a horror game rather than making it actually hard, since if you're not careful, you can make sections of the game trial and error, which can rapidly become tedious. What's more important for me as someone who's pretty thoroughly desensitized to horror from just watching and playing a lot of it is how the mechanics are used to contribute towards character, mood, and atmosphere. A lot of Harry's interactions with the other residents of the town are, to put it simply, pretty darn weird, often coming off stilted and awkward, which is fully intended by the developers to evoke subtextual notions not being literally stated.
Were you ringing that bell?
I've been expecting you. It was foretold by gyromancy.
What are you talking about?
I knew you'd come. You want the girl, right?
The girl? You're talking about Cheryl.
I see everything.
You know something. Tell me.
Stay back. Nothing is to be gained from floundering about at random. You must follow the path. The path of the hermit concealed by Flauros.
What? What are you talking about?
Here, the Flauros, a cage of peace. It can break through the walls of darkness and counteract the wrath of the underworld.
Most of the first half of the game is dedicated to interacting with these people and the environment at large, often leaving quite a lot to interpretation and letting you put the pieces together yourself. Why is Alessa manifesting all of these creatures? Is Dahlia trustworthy? What's going on with Lisa? And so on. This speculating isn't fruitless, since if you can come to the correct conclusion on what's happening, the game gives you options to receive better endings, which I'll discuss the mechanics of in a moment. Having the major environments you engage in be twisted versions of everyday locations was a smart choice. Since most everyone is aware of what a hospital or school is normally supposed to be like, how it changes with the corruption of the town says a lot about what the town is truly like. The Otherworld, in many respects, exists to reveal the other side of society, darker roots obfuscated by the veneer of just being a tourist town.
Harry, listen. Something you said before has been bothering me. I just can't get it out of my head.
What is it, Lisa?
So I went to look in the basement, even though I was scared as hell. Like you said, there were these creepy rooms, but nothing really unusual down there. But while I was down there, I got this weird feeling. Like I'd been there before. Like something happened there, but I can't quite remember somehow. What was it? Harry, help me. I'm so scared. I can't take this.
It's only a temporary thing. You're in shock from when you were knocked out. Don't fret about it. You'll remember after a while.
No. You don't understand.
Wait! Where do you think you're going?
This eventually comes to a head with the potential fight with Sybil. Generally, on a first playthrough, you will be forced to kill her since you lack the means to depossess her, which automatically locks you into one of the game's two bad endings. If you explore a lot before this, though, it's possible to gain a liquid needed to help her, along with helping this asshole Kaufman from dying. Either way, after this event, Dahlia reveals herself to be the true antagonist of the game, a cultist who is using Harry to recapture Alessa in order to use her to birth the cult's god, which he then rushed to put a stop to. Now, while the narrative is partly questioning Harry's heroic role of his failure from the start to save Cheryl, his helpful nature shines through and it gives Alessa potentially another chance to escape the cult's influence. I really do love the idea that this doofus stumbling into town is what inadvertently stops what is essentially the devil from being reborn, and I think having the player in his perspective through this provides a really interesting lens towards examining the realities of child abuse. Alessa is initially set up as an evil child who must be stopped, a writing device deriving itself from European folklore about changelings replacing people's children. A lot of those particular myths originated from a lack of understanding of children with developmental disabilities, and is very tied up with a lot of Christian values of morality, which more often than not historically demonize people for their differences. If we jump forward and examine 1970s American horror films, for instance, you'll see a trend where children are either born demonic or become demonic from outside, often brought on by subverting a traditional family structure. In The Omen, a wife loses her child after birth, who is then replaced by an adopted one in secret, who just so happens to be the son of Satan. The original Exorcist has the possession of Regan not be explicitly stated, but is implied to have happened due to her using a Ouija board, with the film's plot being solved from a heroic sacrifice of a priest who regained his faith. Even the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre deals with occult imagery that is associated implicitly with a destroyed cannibalistic nuclear family. All of this media was made around the same time, and was brought on by discomfort over America's involvement in the Vietnam War, which was one of the first wars publicly televised, and caused essentially a powder keg to go off socially, with many groups explicitly condemning the war and the various ways in which it negatively impacted people's lives. I bring all that up because many of these things were a direct influence on the Silent Hill series, and this cultural context is being used as a springboard to discuss complicated subject matter and subvert narrative conventions that are potentially really harmful. Remember, a huge visual influence on Silent Hill was Jacob's Ladder, which is pretty explicitly about the trauma that came from Vietnam. Alessa is not ultimately the villain of the story, because the reality is most supposed evil children throughout history were victims of systems of control they had no understanding of. Textually, the reason the entire events of the game even happened was because of Dahlia's various schemes to rebirth the cult's god, which is implied to be the cause of the house fire that split Alessa's soul in two, and afterwards resulted in years of horrific physical and mental torture in an attempt to lure Cheryl back into town to complete the ritual. The whole reason the town is projecting so many nightmarish creatures outwards is because of Alessa's mental state as she desperately tries to escape from the abusive cult keeping her trapped, with most of them being things that Alessa was either scared of or associates with the environment in which she was trapped for years. Major content warning again for various scenes of implied and explicit child abuse, but the context is necessary for what I'll talk about next. When you really boil it down, it's possible to read Silent Hill 1 as what happens when the same kid is raised in two radically different social environments, since both Cheryl and Alessa are part of the same person. Harry and Cheryl are not biologically related, but that distinction doesn't matter much at all to him. He still cares for Cheryl the same regardless, and is clearly a good father to her, as implied from various lines of dialogue, and how much he's willing to go through in an attempt to save her.
But, you know, Cheryl isn't my biological daughter. I actually haven't told her yet. She probably already knows anyway, though. We found her abandoned on the side of the highway. Nobody knew where she came from. We didn't have any kids of her own. My wife was sick, and it didn't look like she was getting any better. So we took Cheryl in.
So in that case...
There might be some connection between Cheryl and this town.
So what do you do now?
Cheryl is my daughter. I will save her no matter what.
Whereas, Dahlia is Alessa's biological mother, and is extremely horrible and abusive to her in an attempt to gain power as reinforced by her cult to want. She does not see Alessa as a person. She sees her as an object for things that she wants, and even explicitly equates her to a demon when pushing Harry to stop her from escaping.
I don't want to do it. It will make everyone happy, and it's for your own good, too. Oh, but Mommy, I just want to be with you. Just two of us. Please understand. Oh, yes, I see. Maybe Mommy has been wrong. Mommy! Why didn't I see this before? There's no reason to wait. Herein lies the mother's womb, containing the power to create life. I could have done it all myself. Mommy?
Side tangent. It bothers me quite a lot that the first Silent Hill movie replaced Harry's role with Rose. This came about from the director, Christoph Gans, realizing that if you remove the masculine exterior of the first 4 games, there is a feminine interior which he really resonated with, and he wanted to convey that by having a cast that was entirely women, since he felt the film was not just for the fans. I actually mostly agree with this, and I do acknowledge the work Gans put both behind the scenes to get the film greenlit, and on screen to portray a lot of key moments in raw cinematic language. He is one of the first directors I've seen to understand video games as art and take measures in order to translate works he clearly has a lot of passion for into the screen, which makes the forced inclusion of Sean Bean as Discount Harry all the more frustrating, since the studio got scared at the idea of no men in the film. Like, yeah, let's have cutaways to the bean to ruin the pacing. That'll get people to like the film more. While acknowledging this, having the Shell of Silent Hill 1 story be used instead of something wholly new and original leads itself to unfavorable comparisons. Not helped much by this very bizarre interview Gans also gave, where he argued that Silent Hill had no political correctness when defending the decision to replace Harry. No clue what he meant there. I assume he had a gas leak in his house that he fixed later, but regardless, the implication is that Harry having traditionally feminine character traits was a flaw to correct by literally turning his role into a woman's, which I really disagree with, and I think inadvertently falls into gender essentialist thinking. Men can raise their kids single and be kind, emotionally open, can faint, whatever, and that should be something depicted rather than shied away from. Granted, Gans said and did all this in 2006, so I'd hope he changed his mind in time for his remake of Silent Hill 2, but still, I wish the first film either chose to be a more literal adaptation, or did more its own thing instead of the kind of mid-mess we ended up getting. Getting back on track, let's now discuss the character of Lisa Garland, who is interesting for quite a few reasons. Most obviously, that the Lisa you're interacting with the entire game is a projection of Alessa's. We learned that Lisa secretly harbored a lot of resentments towards Alessa, but was implied to have been coerced by the cult to keep serving as her nurse, and was also chemically dependent on drugs given to her by Kaufman. In a truly heartbreaking scene, honestly probably the saddest moment in the entire series, we see her realize this reality and die once again.
Harry,
Lisa, what's the matter with you?
I get it now. Why I'm still alive even though everyone else is dead. I'm not the only one who's still walking around. I'm the same as them. I just hadn't noticed it before.
Lisa.
Stay by me, Harry. Please. I'm so scared. Help me. Save me from them. Please. Harry.
Lisa.
This Lisa has memories up until her original death, but is often read as just another monster. Now, unlike the differences between Mary and Maria, which I will discuss when I get to Silent Hill 2, I argue there is no meaningful distinction between the live Lisa and this one made of Alessa's memories of her. Why? Well, let's delve into some philosophy. What makes you, you? Are you the sum total of the experiences you've had? Are you the collection of chemicals that make up your brain chemistry? Both? Neither? To me, the true horror of Silent Hill isn't its unreal, strange creatures, but the reality it exposes underneath it. Lisa was a person who had hopes and dreams outside of where she worked, but is ultimately only remembered as Alessa's nurse because that was a role she was forcibly placed into through various means of control. Either as monster or as herself, she's never given her own autonomy and only exists for others. Harry abandoning her, while understandable considering the wild stuff he's seeing, ultimately means that even when she asks to be comforted in death, she's denied even that, and it's definitely the most morally questionable thing Harry ever does. I genuinely don't think she was going to do anything to Harry. I think she was just scared and alone after a while of being scared and alone. Perhaps the reason she existed the way she did was so Harry could understand in part Alessa's own loneliness and suffering, and to help him see it was not just Alessa who needed help. So all this is really solid stuff. It's just a shame that the home stretch from a gameplay perspective is so tedious. The final area, Nowhere, leads into the heart of Silent Hill's cult and is an amalgamation of various nightmares and imagery that Alessa has experienced. While there is quite a lot of really great story material here that I've already referenced, it's stretched across a confusing and tedious maze, which also so happens to involve the game's most difficult puzzles. Now, from a ludonarrative perspective, this section of the game being frustrating makes sense as it's an attempt to put into gameplay the emotions and experiences that Alessa has been through due to her torture in Silent Hill. We are inadvertently being confronted with Alessa's greatest fears and thoughts as she struggles to not cause the end of the world, framed via the hospital she spent most of her life in. I acknowledge this intention and I do think it's admirable, but in execution, it's just way too frustrating to actually play and throws a huge wrench into any future playthroughs because of how difficult it is to remember how to navigate, in my opinion. Especially considering that the conditions for all 5 of the game's endings need to be fulfilled before you get here, with only the joke ending letting you skip it entirely. In my eyes, this is the most dated part of the game, and it's something all subsequent sequels improved upon while still retaining the important core function of helping to reveal important layers of the story's narrative before the end. While I've certainly played worse final areas, I dread going through here again. Now we get into the game's major endings, the best of which, Good Plus, prevents the cult's god from fully reviving, and Alessa being allowed to continue on through a baby she gives to Harry, with her, Harry, and Sybil surviving and starting a sitcom or whatever. Also, Kaufman eats shit like he deserves thanks to Lisa, the bastard. Good is about the same, lacking Sybil's survival, and both bad endings result in Alessa dying through rebirthing the cult's god without continuing on for reincarnation, with Harry dying as well in both. Bad probably has the funniest implications, since he did so terribly the game retcons itself into being a dying dream of Harry's after he crashed his car. Yes, folks, overanalyze this. Oh, and the meme UFO ending, obtained by using a channeling stone in various locations, is mostly just silly nonsense where Harry gets kidnapped, and thus started a long tradition.
Oh, Dad, you're the coolest!
But now we get to do the fun discussion of which ending is canon. This particular debate rages on with basically every Silent Hill game, which I'll probably have to bring up every single time, but here it's generally debated between Good and Good Plus due to the existence of Silent Hill 3. The reason it comes down between these two is because Silent Hill 3 doesn't confirm directly what happened to Sybil. For the record, I think if we take Silent Hill 1 on its own as its own piece of art, then all of the endings are about as legitimately canon as any other, although I would still lean Good Plus as the definitive one due to how it adds important story context and is called, well, Good Plus, and is the hardest ending overall to get. Now, for the supposed proof of Good being the actual canon ending, 2 sources are cited. The Book of Lost Memories, aka the Silent Hill Chronicle, which is an interesting supplemental material to Silent Hill 3's official guide, and a cutscene in Homecoming that discusses Sybil's fate. With the Silent Hill Chronicle, while it has a lot of really interesting stuff in there that is worth taking a look at, it's important to note a lot of it was not directly written by the creators of the games, and Ito himself has said that the staff never even used a story bible to develop the first 3 games. Now, for this particular argument, 2 parts of the book are generally cited. The first is a direct quotation from the writer of Silent Hill 3, Hiroyuki Owaku, saying that what happened to Sybil is up to the player's imagination. And the second is an uncredited line declaring Good the orthodox ending. Remember what I just said about the book not being directly written by the creators? This is why that matters. We have no way to verify who wrote this in 2003, in a book that itself has some inaccuracies in it. And the creators themselves tend to go back and forth on which ending is actually canon, but generally lean towards Good Plus. Also, the cutscene in Homecoming low-key doesn't matter since none of the original creators besides Akira Yamaoka worked on that project. And also in the cutscene itself, they don't confirm what actually happened to her. Wheeler literally says that no one knows. What these annoying arguments about canon fail to bring up is the realities of game development. Sybil's fate being up in the air when it comes time to write a direct sequel to Silent Hill 1 was inevitably going to be an issue no matter which ending they decided to follow, so the creators simply didn't mention her in order to not only not confuse people who don't know about the Good Plus ending, but to also leave both endings open to the player's interpretation. A huge part of these Silent Hill games is being able to express yourself through the choices you make in gameplay, and having that be reflected with the ending you receive. If you're trying as hard as you can to explore the strange environment you're in and helping people along the way, then you're given good plus. If you don't do that, then you get one of the two bad endings. Plus, personally, from a gameplay and story perspective, I don't really see how murdering Sybil is a satisfying conclusion at all if you know she could be saved. Her boss fight is not difficult at all, and it takes a long time to end, giving you a lot of time to question if you're doing something wrong or not. The entire game is discussing the brutal treatment that women experience due to the cult of Silent Hill. Don't you think it'd be a little hypocritical to have a run where you kill a woman who's lobotomized due to the cult of Silent Hill be fully canonized, with no room for other interpretations? I sure think it'd be. All this to say, I quite like the original Silent Hill, warts and all. It was super innovative for the time, and in my eyes still mostly holds up to scrutiny. This was the start of a true dream team, and this game's success opened the door to some of the best horror games ever made. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to do ye old like, comment, and subscribe if you want. I linked all my sources in the description for those curious. Thank you also to my patron for their contribution. If you would like to support me financially, my Patreon is linked down below. That's all for today. See ya.
You enjoy role-playing games. I see that you enjoy Konami games.